Hello, I'm Matt Wilkinson, Royal Editor of The Sun, and this is our show, Royal Exclusive, providing expert analysis this week on the Princess of Wales's new title, the unedited birthday photo of Prince Louis, the King's health, and Harry and Meghan's attempt to win back the British public, is a royal reporter who has spent the past 20 years on the royal rota. It's Richard Palmer. Hello, Richard.
Hi, Matt. Good
Thanks
to see
for
you.
coming. Now, as I say, royal rota reporter for many, many years. Births, deaths, marriages, weddings are the staple of our job. This week we have this wonderful picture of Prince Louis celebrating his 6th birthday. We read a lot into these photographs that, I see, Princess of Wales took this one this week. We read a lot into them, we analyse them, but why is it so important, do you think, that the royal family put these pictures out? Because we don't get pictures of presidents' children or politicians' children, but what does it give the public to see these?
No, but they're part of the package, aren't they? They're our first family, if you like, and the whole idea is it's a royal family. So, particularly in the case of Prince George, because he's going to be a future king, there's obviously going to be a lot of public interest in what sort of a boy he is and what sort of a young man he's shaping up to be, and perhaps slightly less so with Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis, but still they're part of the deal, and so I think the public the public really enjoys seeing pictures of them. They're a very popular family in the UK at the moment, and I think around the world. If we don't see them, then there's a danger that the royal family, interest in the royal family, withers and dies, I would say.
We like seeing them, we enjoy watching them grow up, because remember, we saw Louis, and before he knew he was Prince Louis, we knew he was Prince Louis, emerging on the kind of steps at the hospital, so we kind of follow their lives. The important thing about this, or the interesting thing about this, is that it was taken by the Princess of Wales. It comes several weeks after the drama surrounding the Mother's Day photo, which the Sun, and I think we heavily supported the fact that the Princess was under pressure. We think it was over the top, the kind of criticism that came her way. But the Palace were at pains to say that this photo hasn't been edited. What do you think about that?
Well, yes, I think that's interesting, because I think they're responding to the controversy, and I think it's likely that it'll be the same with Princess Charlotte's picture, same format, going out on social media, but unedited. And I think they don't have to do that. I mean, I think they could just say, this is a picture, it's been photoshopped, and it's up to you whether you want to use it or not. But I think, like you, I've had pelters on social media for the last 24 hours over reporting the fact that this picture is unedited, and a lot of the sort of royal fans, the people who are very invested in this particular family, and perhaps know more about them than ordinary Britons do, are outraged that we're still talking about this. But I think it is an important issue, and I think deep fake images, artificial intelligence created images, are a problem for our democracy, and as a result, picture agencies have changed their ethical guidelines about use of Photoshop and other ways of altering images digitally, and so as a result, they felt they couldn't. They had to issue a kill notice on the previous pictures, and personally, I can understand why. And because photographers have been sacked for putting out images that have been digitally altered. So you put yourself in the position as an employer, for example. If you have sacked somebody for digitally altering a picture, and then you put out a royal picture that clearly has been digitally altered, where does that leave you if you're being taken to an employment tribunal or to court over it? So I can see why they're in a difficult position. And of course, that all came at a time when there were ridiculous conspiracy theories about where is Kate, and it all played into all of that. So I think they need to move on, and this is probably quite a good way of moving on by just saying, look, it hasn't been edited. This is a picture.
Well, there are already wild conspiracy theories about this photo, which I don't even want to delve down into that horrible canyon of nonsense. But we will see, or we do often see Prince Louis at events. You know, we see him at the Jubilee and stuff like that. I was wondering. We don't really get much access to the children, which is absolutely makes perfect sense. But we do see them, and we do enjoy seeing the three children, particularly Charlotte, Louis, and George. Have you ever had any interaction? Have you ever been lucky enough to see these young princes or princesses?
I have on a few occasions on royal engagements. I can remember. I think it was Charlotte's christening at Sandringham, if I remember rightly. George came up to the press pen and was sort of, very interested in all of us, and everybody was saying, hello, how are you? And his parents quickly came and dragged him away from us, I think, hoping he wouldn't get into too much mischief. But then also, I think this has been mentioned before by some royal journalists. After George was born, there was a reception at Kensington Palace where Kate actually brought George down and showed him to all of us. So, I can't remember how old he was. He was pretty young at the time. It was a really lovely occasion. So I can see why they're very protective of their children. And I think if you look at how William and Harry's childhood went, they were clearly damaged by the media interest in them. And so I think also they had two parents who obviously weren't getting on very well and then split up, were working away a lot of the time. And so you can see why William is very keen to ensure that he's there for his family, and Kate's has made it clear that her children will be her priority while they're in education, really, certainly at school. But also, I think they have to balance that with the public interest in the institution of monarchy, and they are, very much part of the future of the institution of the monarchy.
100%. This is, they don't seem to understand when they are so young that the public have such a huge interest in them.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a stage when I read in Robert Lacey's book recently that he mentions he believed that George was probably told when he was about 6 years old that he had or 7 years old, sorry, that he was going to have these huge responsibilities placed on him. It must be a difficult conversation for William and Catherine to have with their children, to tell them that they are, they're prince and princesses. That's why everyone's waving at them as they're going down the carriages down the Mall.
Yeah, I mean, what a strange life, and really, I would imagine. George is now starting to become aware that his whole life is effectively mapped out for him, and he will be expected to. I think they wouldn't force him to, but he will be expected to go into the armed forces, and he will be expected at some point to become a full-time working royal, long before he is king, and if he can have a career before that, that'll be a bonus, really. Outside of the military, I would imagine he'll probably follow in his father's footsteps and go into the military, and then when the time is right, leave the military and become a full-time working royal. And
this is it a slight contrast to Harry and Meghan? Because we don't really see their children. They've decided not to. Their Netflix shows that they're doing, the Polo Show and the Cookery Show, we now know that the kids are not going to appear, so they're not going to feature. They were in the Netflix series, the six-parter. But is there a contrast there, or do you think William and Harry are both taking a similar approach to keeping their children as much possible shielded out of public view?
I think they're both very protective and both quite aggressive if they feel that the media or the public have overstepped the mark in their sort of curiosity about their children. But I think there is a difference, because clearly Harry and Meghan have opted out of the whole shebang, and they have a much greater ability to say, our kids are not public property, and we've barely seen photos of them, have we?
Mm. There is as I say, we don't get birthday photos of Lilibet and Archie. but there's, it's their choice. Talking of parenting, Princess of Wales, obviously you pointed out that she spoke about she wanted to spend as much time as possible with her children while she was, getting through her cancer diagnosis. She's got a new title this week. It's a bit of a mouthful. I'm going to have to read it out. She is the Royal Companion for the Order of the Companions of Honour. It's a new title, but, it's rewarding her public service and, I believe, her interest in the arts.
Yes.
Why do you think the King has chosen to present the Princess of Wales? Because they're both going through cancer diagnosis at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lovely gesture, and it's a very supportive one of her. I mean, he's clearly really very fond of her, and I think wanted to promote the idea that she's been doing an awful lot of work in support of the arts and just her public service generally.
A new report, or perhaps we should say, another wave of criticism, has emerged from someone who claims to have witnessed firsthand how Meghan Markle and Prince Harry treated royal staff. The individual alleges, "I watched Meghan and Harry rip apart royal staff. Nothing was ever right, and there was always an inquest." It's a statement that reignites a long-running debate, one that involves conflicting narratives, emotional accounts, and the often invisible labor behind royal life. The claim comes from an unnamed former insider, reportedly someone who observed Meghan and Harry during their time as working royals. They describe an environment filled with tension, high expectations, and frequent fallout between the couple and palace staff. Specifically, they claim that staff were frequently blamed or reprimanded. The atmosphere was often tense and combative.
I think royal fans, for want of a better phrase, will be really interested in all of this and all of these titles. But I have to say, for a lot of ordinary people in this country, I mean, I think they'll just wonder what it's all about. And of course, critics are already piling in and saying, it's just, the King giving more baubles to his family. I can see why he's done it. She's clearly going through a really difficult time at the moment, so I think it will be seen as a nice gesture. I did, I've met her a few times, so when we have these media receptions or whatever, and I think that she is very often unfairly labelled as sort of a bit of an airhead who doesn't really know what she's doing. And I have to say, I've always been really impressed with her. I think she's highly intelligent. She, unlike the ones that were born into the family, she's a very good listener sometimes. It's not that they're not good listeners, it's just that William, Harry, some of the others, they are used to being the centre of attention. Their whole lives they've been the centre of attention, so they're used to dominating the conversation. And she is very good, I've found, at sort of saying, what do you think? What are your opinions? And listening to you. And when she chose her first patronages, I thought they were inspired because she thought very carefully about she can't get involved in sort of things that are politically sensitive, party political, but she chose patronages that dealt with some of the fundamental problems in our country, the sort of breakdown of family life, addiction. And I remember telling her that at one point my wife was interested in becoming a magistrate, and we spent an afternoon down at Portsmouth City Magistrates in Hampshire, near where we live. And just about every case that came up, you could tell, either addiction or mental health problems were at the root of the crime, really.
And did she react to that in any way? I think so.
Yeah, she found that very interesting, and we've seen her work since on, I've covered her going to prisons, talking to women prisoners about how their own sort of childhood traumas they felt had led to addiction problems and a life of crime, and I think the work she's doing in trying to improve the first 5 years of children's lives is really important. I'm always slightly amused that I'm not sure she's actually said it herself, but certainly her people working for her have said that she wants to reduce inequality. And of course, she sits at the very top, the very pyramid of the social.
Well, it's a difficult one for them to juggle, you know, like William's talking about homelessness and stuff like that. And
Yes.
so the same questions are levelled at him, but, you know, they are doing things, you know, she is actually using her position to actually achieve things. So
exactly.
it's
and
really difficult to lob those.
And he gets the brickbats, you know, why do you need all those homes if you want to
It's really unfair at times.
Yes,
talking of titles, obviously, there was from Order of the Garters, and I'm not going to go through who got the Order of the Garters, but there was a new Order of the Garters, which is the highest chivalric order. It dates back to Arthur and the Round Table, you know, so many years ago.
1348, Edward III.
Edward III.
Yes.
I think he was inspired by, but it's a proper chivalric kind of thing. But Prince Andrew remains an order, but he's banned from the public aspects of the event. Would there be a chance for the king when he makes these title changes to maybe remove this order from Prince Andrew?
I'm not sure about the legal process of it. I imagine that it's possible, but I just think that would be very difficult for him to so publicly shame his brother like that. I can't see it happening, and but of course, you know, Andrew's situation is a perpetual embarrassment for the king and for the rest of the family.
And talking about the king, we did a story a couple of weeks ago that he was supercharging his diary. That, you know, we know about, well documented about his cancer struggles, but that he wants to, you know, get back out this summer. It was reported a couple of days ago that he might go to Ascot. Well, why do you think it's so important for the king to be out, to be seen, to not rush back too quickly and be cautious? But why is it so important for him to be out there, possibly at Ascot?
Well, I think it was his late mother, who said, "I have to be seen to be believed," and I do think that's true. And you know, it comes back to those photos as well. I think the public need to see the monarchy out and about. They need to see members of the royal family undertaking official engagements. Clearly, Britain's horse racing industry is a very important. Economically, it's quite an important industry, and it's been the sport of kings for centuries. So I think the sport would say that it's really important for the royal family to show their support for Royal Ascot, and for the king, if he can, to be there. I mean, I reckon he'll be there. Whether he can make it every day like he did last year remains to be seen. But certainly the mood music coming out of the palace is that in May and June, he and Queen Camilla are going to be very busy. So, which is obviously good news, because you know, there's concern about his health, as there is about Princess of Wales's health. But at the moment, although people close to them are saying we need to be cautious, you know, it is looking quite positive.
And Richard, you were on the Daily Express for 20 years on the Royal Rota. A new job that you could have got was Harry and Meghan have got themselves a new press officer for the UK. So this is the first time in 4 years that they've got a new comms officer for the UK and Europe. Is it a job that you'd be interested in? Does this mean that we are, God forbid, we're going to have more news this side of the pond about Harry and Meghan now they've got an actual designated communications expert working for them here?
Well, it's really interesting that they're employing somebody, isn't it? Because for quite a while they didn't really want to engage with the UK media. But I think their need to employ a PR over on this side of the pond shows how they've lost the public support over here, and they've lost positive PR, positive coverage in the media. And, you know, I can remember times in the past when some of your predecessors on The Sun used to say that, you know, oh, Harry's so popular, he's, you know, all the women readers would love to date him, and all the blokes would like to go out for a drink with him. And the idea that he would get lots of negative media coverage was more or less unthinkable back in those days. And it's been interesting to see how the public's perception of him has changed. Now, you can argue, is that because the media have reported negatively on him, or is that because the media are just reflecting what the public think about him? I suspect it's more the latter. But they need to up their game over here. I think they've lost public support, and certainly they've already appointed somebody. I don't think that job would have been for me, but I'd be interested in engaging with them because I do think that. I do think Harry and his father are trying to reconcile. I think with William, it's going to be a much longer process, but eventually, maybe lots of families have disputes, and over time, they can heal their divisions. But there's a big job to be done yet with William. The King, I think, is open to reconciliation, but I don't. You may disagree, but I don't think is open to the idea that Harry could be a sort of part-time working royal. I think they drew a line in the sand at Sandringham all those years ago now, where they essentially said you can't be a part-time working royal. You're either in or you're out. But it's been upsetting, I think, for quite a lot of journalists to see how the whole royal scene has become bitterly divided and quite toxic. And, to be accused of racism has been really upsetting for a lot of journalists, I think, by Harry and Meghan supporters. I used to love dealing with him. He was a lovely guy, very funny. Loved the fact that he wore his heart on his sleeve. You could talk. You could have a chat with him. I mean, I can remember a bit of banter with him in the Caribbean in 2016 when he'd arrived early to be greeted by the Prime Minister of a particular island, what Caribbean island we were visiting. And so came over to talk to us in the press who were there, introduced himself to a female reporter from one of the British papers who wasn't a normal royal correspondent, then started joking at my expense about, oh, you haven't been up all night drinking like Richard Palmer then. And,
Had you been up drinking all night?
I hadn't.
Oh, okay.
And I told him, how very dare
For the
you.
record.
How very dare you. But I loved all of that. And there was a colleague on another paper. He remembers it slightly differently, but the way I remember it, Harry sidling up to him saying, I see you're still writing, nonsense. Nonsense wasn't the word he used, but you could deal with all of that. Yeah. And but also, I can remember going to Colorado to cover him visiting the Warrior Games, which was really the prototype for the Invictus Games, and we had a press reception where he was essentially saying to us, I'm thinking of setting up these games for wounded troops. Do you think your editors would support it? And everyone said, yeah, I think so.
So he was actually asking journalists for their opinion on how he should operate or what kind of projects he should make.
Yeah. And of course, the British press did give a lot of support to that. In fact, I got a letter from the sort of organiser of the first Invictus Games thanking me personally for my support for that. And at the same time, I can remember him getting really quite agitated on that trip about something he'd read in Heat magazine. And we were sort of, why are you worrying about what's in Heat magazine? They haven't got a royal correspondent. But he sort of saw the media just as one thing. And to him, there wasn't that much difference between a royal correspondent and somebody who'd never reported on him before.
There were ongoing inquests into staff performance or perceived failings. While the details remain anonymous and unverified, it mirrors similar themes reported during the so-called bullying investigation launched by the palace in 2021, which notably was never publicly released. This isn't the first time accusations like this have surfaced. Several reports over the years, mostly from royal aides or anonymous sources, have claimed that Meghan, in particular, could be demanding, hard to please, or overly critical of staff. Supporters of the Sussexes, however, argue that these stories are part of a smear campaign, often rooted in racism, misogyny, and resistance to change within the royal institution. They also point to the fact that no formal conclusions were made public in the bullying inquiry, suggesting that either the claims lack substance or that the palace had no interest in escalating the matter.
And he was also very worried about, I remember him being worried about, the readers' comments underneath a news website's, not my current, at that point website, but another newspaper company's website. And I don't think anybody could really understand why he was micromanaging things and why he was so agitated about things, because clearly there was a lot of nonsense said and written about him at times.
Well, there's a lot of news written about him at times. That's probably why they need a UK press
There
officer.
is, yes.
But the news, well, the last couple of things that have been happening with Harry that draw my attention is this visa issue. So there was this think tank in the USA that says we need to reveal, we need to know what Harry said on his visa application, whether he admitted taking drugs, whether he got preferential treatment to actually come into the USA and have a visa because he's made all these confessions in spare. He could easily just, this is a court case now, but
Yes.
he could easily just, he could show his visa application. He could prove he isn't lying. What are your thoughts on what he's doing there?
Yeah, well, he clearly doesn't want to. He wants to maintain the confidentiality of that whole process. And I don't think it's really clear, certainly not clear to me, on what basis he is living and working in the US at the moment. No. Does he have a green card? Does he? It's not clear. And the US government clearly doesn't want to disclose all those details either. I think it's a problem for him, but it also illustrates another problem for him, is that he and Meghan have become very divisive in the US as well as over here. Clearly they have their supporters over here as well. But in the US, it seems to be quite political. And although there are obviously exceptions to the rule, and I'm aware, I know people personally who are exceptions to this, but generally Democrats seem to be more sympathetic to him, and Republicans really don't seem to be keen on Harry and Meghan at all. And if Donald Trump gets back in this year, then that's another potential problem for him, because Trump doesn't seem very keen on Harry either.
He says a lot of things, Donald Trump. But he's made it very clear that he's not a fan, I think he said, of Harry and Meghan. You mentioned about divisive. It's really interesting that, I think with Harry and Meghan, their stock has gradually gone down the longer that they've been in America and the longer that they've actually given their side of the story. I think when they left, there was still a lot of sympathy for them. And I think that's gradually dwindled as we've heard their story and their opinion, and heard their struggles over time. One of the things that is going to rear its head also is Meghan's podcast, which we're led to believe has been delayed. So they kind of announced it earlier this year that she was going to do her Archetypes podcast, is moving to a very much smaller label from Spotify. That, with the visa and with these shows which don't exactly grab my they don't make me excited, the shows. No. Is it turning bad for Harry and Meghan? Is the dream gradually, sliding away, particularly with the podcast issue, that if she can't get it out this year, what on earth is going on?
I think so. I think they've struggled. I think, initially when they based themselves over there, it drove me nuts, I have to say, that the American media essentially took a line that, what have those racist Brits done to our American princess? I thought that was very unfair, because it was much more nuanced than that. And that, initially, of course, as so many people have pointed out, Meghan was treated as a breath of fresh air, and a fantastic addition to the family by the British media. But there's been a change. I think the US media has got bored with them continually moaning about the way they've been treated, and essentially has said, right, we've heard that story. We don't want to hear about that any longer. We want, if you are Americans, essentially, if you're basing yourself here, then you need to show us that you are enterprising people who are creating new lives for yourselves out here. What have you got to show us? And I think they've been beset by problems, really. They've sort of one step forward, two steps back all the time.
Yeah, I mean, this another thing that keeps popping up was, I think you mentioned it earlier, that this idea that Harry could come back and be a part-time royal. Thinking back to Sandringham, the Sandringham summit, which you were reporting on at the time, what do you recall as the what was the feeling then within the households and within reporting on it? Because if they do have a new comms officer, the first time since, we can say that Sarah Latham was the comms officer when you were during the Sandringham summit, who was a big deal, very impressive woman, very experienced, but it ended badly. Could possibly bringing in this new PR team could be a way to relaunch them back into the United Kingdom and maybe push this angle of them wanting to be part-time royals again? Well,
they may try and push it, but I may be proved wrong, but I just can't see it happening. I just don't think that is on the cards. Although I have to say, at the time of the Sandringham summit, a senior royal aide who was very close to the now king, then Prince of Wales, was saying that this was entirely possible, that was sort of certainly pushing that line, that they were open to discussions about that. And then I don't know what happened. It could be that sometimes people who brief the media, even if they're sort of senior people who are authorised to speak to the media, don't get the full story. It's possibly that, or was it that something changed and the Queen, encouraged by the then Prince Charles and Prince William, just essentially said, no, we can't countenance this, that there's no way back. They're either in or they're out. I have to say, you mentioned Sarah Latham, and I fell out with Sarah Latham a little bit. I mean, I'm having a bash for the Royal Press Pack and people at the Palace. And over the years, you do inevitably have fallings out with people over issues. And I've come to realise, actually, that Sarah was in a really difficult position. I mean, she was caught between a rock and a hard place. She was trying to be loyal to the people who employed her, Harry and Meghan. She was getting pelters from the press because of the way that they were behaving. There were staff in the royal household who were complaining about the way Harry and Meghan were treating them. I've certainly spoken to people, and I know, Valentine Lowe has written about this, and I'm sure you've spoken to people who have said that nothing they did for them was ever right, and that there was always a massive inquest after every royal engagement that they did. Why did we do this? Why did you say that? I think it was really, really difficult for a lot of people. And so I haven't actually managed to get in touch with Sarah. Somebody was hoping to put me in touch with her, but I really want to say to her that I'm sorry, actually, for the way I behaved at the time. And I understand the difficult position she was in.
Yeah, I mean, these were really stressful times.
Yes.
Around 2020 or the last couple of years. But whatever happens, whether they get a new communications team and do a real drive in the UK, or whether they just remain in the USA, we will still have loads and loads to talk about and loads and loads to write about. Richard, it's the Prince and Princess of Wales's 13th wedding anniversary, I think, on Monday, which, I'm sure we all send our best wishes to them. It's been a successful partnership. Why do you think it's worked so well? And now, obviously, with the struggles they're going through, they must be closer than ever.
I think so. I read stuff online about the state of their marriage, and I just don't recognise it at all. I'm talking mainly about social media and some of the lunatics on social media, but because whenever I've seen them up close, I think it's very difficult to know what goes on in anybody's marriage, whether they're public figures or, close friends or whatever. Things go on behind closed doors. But everything I've seen of that couple suggests to me that they are really close, and, the body language, everything, you can just tell that I think anyway, that they're really into each other, and that the marriage has worked. There's a meeting of minds there. I was there on the day, and that whole period. I mean, my life changed the day that they announced that they were getting engaged, and the amount of work just rose exponentially. I used to cycle. I used to take my bike on the train and cycle to the office and do the reverse journey. But I abandoned it from that moment onwards, because there was just like an extra. There were always things to go to first thing in the morning, things to go to late at night, and you just would have added like an extra 3 or 4 hours onto my day to do all that. The wedding, I think, was that whole period from when they got engaged in, I think it was autumn 2010, married in 2011, and then the Jubilee 2012, I think was the high point of the second Elizabethan age. And, it's gone up and down since. We're now in a new reign. I think the king has, had a much better start to his reign than many people expected. Clearly, things have been blown off course a little bit by his illness and by Kate's illness. It's going to be interesting to see.
Behind every royal engagement is a team of professionals, aides, assistants, communication staff, and planners who manage logistics, scheduling, and public relations. Working for senior royals, especially ones as globally scrutinized as Harry and Meghan, likely comes with immense pressure. If the couple had specific expectations, tighter control over messaging, or were trying to modernize operations, clashes were almost inevitable. Publicly, Harry and Meghan have positioned themselves as advocates for kindness, compassion, and mental health. But when claims like this surface, suggesting the couple created a toxic environment, it raises uncomfortable questions about consistency and credibility. Critics see it as hypocrisy. Supporters view it as a distorted narrative, amplified by royal loyalists and a hostile press.